The forest was quiet, too quiet for a normal evening. Tall blue trees swayed under the alien sky, and strange glowing insects flew lazily between the branches. A human traveler named Daniel walked carefully along a narrow path. His boots pressed against the soft moss and his eyes scanned the dark corners. He had traveled across many worlds, but this planet always gave him a strange feeling, as if danger was hiding behind every shadow. Suddenly, he heard it. The sound of quick footsteps. They were light, desperate, and uneven, like someone running for their life. Daniel stopped and turned his head. The sound grew louder, crashing through the thick bushes. His heart jumped. Something was coming. Before he could react, a small figure burst out of the trees and almost fell at his feet. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin was pale silver, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Her wide golden eyes shined with fear, and strange markings ran along her cheeks. She looked fragile, trembling and out of breath. Without saying a word, she rushed behind Daniel and clutched the back of his jacket. Her hands shook violently as she tried to hide. Daniel froze. He had never seen such fear in someone's eyes before. "Please," her soft voice cracked, almost like a whisper. "Don't let them take me." Daniel's instincts screamed at him to move, to run, but something inside him refused. He turned his head slightly, trying to see her face. Her tears reflected the faint starlight and his chest tightened. Whoever she was running from, it wasn't good. The silence didn't last. Low growls echoed from the forest, followed by heavy footsteps. Daniel gripped the strap of his backpack and stood taller. From the shadows, 3 tall figures emerged. They weren't human either. Their bodies were covered with dark armor made of bone and metal, and their sharp helmets glowed with red lights. Each carried a strange weapon, something between a spear and a rifle. Their presence made the forest feel colder. One of them stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the night air. "Human," he growled, "step aside. That creature belongs to us." Daniel's heart pounded, but he didn't move. The girl pressed herself closer to him, shaking her head. He could feel her fear, like a storm behind him. "She's terrified," Daniel said slowly, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Why is she running from you?" The alien warrior's laugh was harsh. "You wouldn't understand. She's dangerous. Give her to us and you can walk away alive." The girl gasped and gripped Daniel's arm tightly. "They're lying," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. "Please, don't let them take me." Daniel looked at her, then at the hunters. He didn't know her name, her story, or why she had chosen him of all people to hide behind. But he knew one thing. She was more afraid of them than of him. That was enough. He stepped slightly in front of her, his hand clenched into a fist. "If she's so dangerous," he said, "why does she look like she's about to break?" The warriors exchanged glances. Their leader raised his weapon, the red light glowing brighter. "Last chance, human, move." Daniel's mind raced. He had no weapon, no backup, and no plan. Yet as he stood there, he realized he couldn't move aside. This girl had trusted him in the middle of her terror. If he betrayed that trust, he wouldn't forgive himself. The girl's breath was ragged. She tried to whisper something again, but her voice broke into sobs. Daniel felt her tears against his sleeve. The weight of her fear became his own. The forest suddenly erupted with noise, branches snapping, more footsteps closing in from every direction. They weren't just 3. There were more hunters surrounding them. The alien girl clung tighter to Daniel, her whole body trembling like a trapped bird. Daniel's throat went dry, but he forced himself to stay calm. "If you want her," he muttered, "you'll have to go through me first." For a moment there was silence. The hunters looked surprised, as if they had not expected resistance from a lone human. Then their leader tilted his head and laughed cruelly. "So be it," he said. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stood tall, though fear burned inside him. Behind him, the alien girl pressed her forehead into his back, whispering words he could barely hear. "Thank you." Those 2 words struck him harder than any weapon. He tightened his grip on his backpack strap, ready for whatever came next. The chase was not over. It had only just begun. The forest was no longer quiet. Strange calls echoed through the trees, mixed with the steady sound of armored boots crushing leaves and twigs. Daniel stood tall, though his heartbeat was loud in his ears. The alien girl stayed behind him, gripping his sleeve like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The hunters closed in. Their glowing eyes and bone-like armor made them look less like men and more like shadows brought to life. The leader raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Daniel's chest. "Human," the leader said coldly. "You don't know what you are doing. This girl is not what she looks like. Hand her over and you will live." Daniel swallowed hard. He glanced back at the girl. Her golden eyes, wide and wet with tears, begged him to stay. She shook her head quickly, whispering, "Don't believe them. They're lying." Daniel turned back. "If she's dangerous," he asked, forcing his voice to stay firm, "why is she hiding like a frightened child?" The hunter's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Because prey always pretends to be innocent. You don't understand her kind. She carries a curse. If you stand in our way, you will die with her." The words hung heavy in the air. The girl pressed herself closer to Daniel's back. He could feel her shaking through his jacket. For a second, he almost believed the hunter, but then he looked at her scars, at the raw fear in her eyes, and his doubt vanished. No curse looked like this. No predator cried for help like she did. Daniel took a slow step forward. "I'm not moving," the hunter stiffened. Their leader tilted his head, red light glowing brighter from his weapon. "Then you have chosen death." The forest suddenly erupted with movement. From the shadows, more hunters appeared, circling around. They moved with frightening precision, like wolves tightening their circle around prey. Daniel's throat went dry. There were at least 6 of them now, maybe more, hiding in the trees. The alien girl gasped softly. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll take me back, and I'll never be free again." Daniel clenched his jaw. He had no plan, no weapon stronger than the small knife in his belt. But he knew one thing. He couldn't let them take her. He stepped back slightly, placing himself fully between the girl and the hunters. His shadow covered her as if he could shield her from the entire world. The leader of the hunters raised his hand. The others froze, waiting. He studied Daniel with curious eyes, as though trying to decide if the human was brave or simply foolish. "Why protect her?" the leader asked slowly. "She is nothing to you. She is not of your blood, not of your people. Why risk your life for a stranger?" Daniel took a deep breath. He didn't know why himself. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, desperate and broken. Maybe it was because he had seen too much cruelty in the galaxy and couldn't stand one more act of it. Or maybe it was simply because she had chosen to trust him when she had no one else. "Because someone has to," he said firmly. The hunters hissed in unison, like snakes disturbed in their nest. The leader lowered his weapon, then pointed at the girl with a sharp claw. "You will regret this. She carries blood that must not live free. You will see her true nature soon enough." The girl whimpered and hid her face against Daniel's arm. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The hunters began to move closer, their boots cracking branches with every step. Daniel's pulse raced. He looked around quickly, searching for an escape. The forest stretched endlessly, thick and dark. Somewhere there had to be a path. The girl tugged his sleeve, whispering urgently, "There's a cave near the river. I used to hide there. We can make it if we run." Daniel nodded slightly. His brain screamed that it was madness to turn his back on armed hunters, but standing still meant death anyway. He tightened his grip on her hand. "When I move, you run with me. Don't stop. Understand?" She nodded, her golden eyes shining with fear and trust. Daniel exhaled sharply, then bent his knees like a sprinter waiting for the signal. The hunters raised their weapons, aiming. For a brief second, time slowed. The forest was silent except for his heartbeat. Then Daniel shouted, "Now!" He pulled the girl's hand and dashed into the trees. The hunters roared, weapons firing beams of red energy that cut through branches and lit up the night. Sparks flew as shots hit rocks and trees around them. The forest exploded with chaos. The girl stumbled, but Daniel yanked her forward. His legs burned as he pushed himself faster, dodging roots and low branches. Behind them, the hunters crashed through the undergrowth, their growls echoing like wild beasts. One beam grazed Daniel's arm, burning through his sleeve. He hissed in pain but didn't stop. The girl cried out, nearly tripping, but Daniel caught her and dragged her forward. "Keep running," he urged. The forest grew darker, thicker, but ahead he heard the rush of water. The river. Hope sparked inside him. If they could reach the cave, maybe they had a chance. Behind them, the hunters' shadows stretched closer. Their voices shouted commands in a harsh alien tongue. The chase had truly begun. And though fear weighed heavily on Daniel, a strange fire burned inside him. He didn't know this girl, didn't know her past, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let her face the hunters alone. Not tonight. Daniel's lungs burned as he pushed himself forward, dragging the alien girl along the uneven ground. Branches scratched his arms, roots caught his boots, and every breath felt like fire. But behind them, the hunters' voices echoed louder and closer. Red beams of energy cut through the darkness, striking trees and exploding bark into sparks. The girl stumbled again, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Daniel quickly steadied her, pulling her back to her feet. "Just a little further," he whispered urgently. "You said there's a cave. Where is it?" She raised a shaky hand, pointing toward the sound of rushing water. "There, near the riverbank." "Hurry." The forest opened slightly and Daniel's heart lifted when he saw silver light reflecting off moving water. The river flowed fast, its surface glowing faintly under the alien moon. Beside it, hidden behind a cluster of large stones and twisted roots, was a dark hole, the cave entrance. "Go," Daniel urged, pushing her inside first. They crawled into the narrow space, the cool air damp against their skin. Once inside, Daniel turned and dragged a fallen branch across the entrance, hiding it as best he could. The hunters' footsteps thundered past a few moments later, their shouts carried away by the wind. For the first time since the chase began, there was silence. Only the sound of the rushing river outside filled the air. Daniel collapsed against the cave wall, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. The alien girl sat near him, hugging her knees, her body shaking uncontrollably. Daniel watched her for a moment. She looked so small, so fragile, curled up in the shadows. Slowly he broke the silence. "Who are they?" he asked softly. "Why are they after you?" The girl didn't answer at first. She buried her face in her arms as if the words themselves were too heavy to speak. Finally, she lifted her head. Her golden eyes glistened in the dim light. "My name is Lyra," she whispered. "I am the last of my family, maybe the last of my kind." Daniel frowned, leaning closer. "The last? What do you mean?" Lyra's lips trembled as she spoke. "Those hunters, they work for the ones who destroyed my village. They came at night with fire and cages. They said we were not people, we were subjects, experiments for their science. They took everyone." Her voice broke and tears slid down her cheeks. "I escaped, but I have been running ever since." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He had seen cruelty before, but the thought of an entire people hunted and experimented on filled him with anger. He clenched his fists. "That's why they called you dangerous?" "Because you survived." Lyra nodded weakly. "They want to use me. They say my blood carries something rare, something powerful. But it's a lie. I am just me." She hugged herself tightly. "They killed my parents when they tried to protect me. I saw it happen. I still hear their screams every night." Her words hit Daniel like a blade. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He looked at the girl trembling in front of him, no older than a teenager, scarred and broken, yet still fighting to stay alive. He took a deep breath. "Lyra, you're not alone anymore. Not while I'm here." Her eyes widened slightly. "But why? You don't even know me. Helping me will put your life in danger. They won't stop until they catch me, and you too." Daniel gave a tired smile. "Because no one deserves to be hunted like that. And because you trusted me when you had no one else." "That's enough." Lyra blinked rapidly, tears falling again. For the first time her trembling slowed. She looked at him with something different in her eyes. Hope. The cave was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Less empty, more alive. Daniel pulled a small medkit from his backpack and gently reached for her arm. "You're hurt," he said. "Let me see." Lyra hesitated, then slowly extended her arm. There were raw burns and cuts along her silver skin, marks of both escape and cruelty. Daniel carefully cleaned them, wrapping a strip of cloth around the worst wound. She winced but didn't pull away. "You've been running for a long time, haven't you?" Daniel asked softly. "Yes," Lyra whispered. "Every day feels like the last. I don't know how much longer I can keep going." "You're not alone anymore," Daniel repeated firmly. "We'll find a way out. Together." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. A faint, fragile smile tugged at her lips, the first smile he had seen on her face. But their moment of peace didn't last. A low growl echoed from outside the cave. Both of them froze. Shadows moved near the entrance and faint red lights glowed through the cracks in the rocks. The hunters were back. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She reached for Daniel's arm. "They found us," she whispered in terror. Daniel's jaw tightened. His exhaustion faded, replaced with sharp determination. He pulled the knife from his belt, the small blade gleaming faintly in the dark. "Then we fight," he said quietly. Lyra's golden eyes shined in the darkness, filled with both fear and trust. For the first time, she wasn't running alone. And for the first time, Daniel realized this fight was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting something precious. The cave grew colder as the growls outside grew louder. Daniel's grip on his small knife tightened. The red glow of the hunter's weapons leaked through the cracks in the rocks, painting the walls in eerie light. Lyra pressed herself closer to him, her breath quick and shallow. "They're here," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They'll drag me back." "I can't go back." Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You won't. Not while I'm breathing." The words felt heavy, but they carried truth. He knew he couldn't face them in a direct fight. Not with their weapons and numbers, but he had to protect her. That thought alone gave him courage. The crunch of boots came closer. Shadows moved at the cave entrance. The hunters spoke in their harsh, guttural tongue, their voices echoing like thunder. Daniel's eyes darted around the cave, searching for anything. A second exit, a crack, a tunnel. His heart pounded when he spotted a narrow opening at the back of the cave, half hidden by moss and rock. "Lyra," he whispered urgently, pointing. "There, crawl through it." Her golden eyes widened with fear. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you, go." She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Daniel pushed aside the moss, revealing a small tunnel that sloped downward. Lyra dropped to her hands and knees and crawled through, her silver skin catching the faint light. Daniel crouched low, following her just as the hunters shoved aside the branch at the cave's entrance. A blast of red energy struck the wall, showering sparks across the stone. Daniel ducked and scrambled into the tunnel. The hunters' shouts echoed behind him, their boots pounding closer. The tunnel was tight, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. His shoulders scraped against the stone as he pushed forward, following Lyra's faint glow ahead of him. The ground sloped downward, carrying them deeper into darkness. Behind them, the hunters forced their way inside, their growls bouncing through the narrow space. "Faster," Daniel urged, his voice low but urgent. Lyra crawled as quickly as she could, her breathing ragged. The tunnel twisted and narrowed, the air growing damp and cold. Finally, after what felt like forever, it opened into a hollow chamber. A faint sound of rushing water echoed from below. "There's a way out," Lyra whispered, pointing to a crack in the stone where moonlight filtered through. Daniel helped her squeeze through the opening, and together they stumbled out onto a rocky ledge overlooking the river. The water roared below, wild and unforgiving. The hunters burst from the tunnel behind them, their glowing eyes locking onto the fugitives. One raised his weapon, firing a beam that scorched the rock near Daniel's feet. "Run," Daniel shouted. He grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her along the ledge. Loose stones crumbled under their boots, falling into the raging water below. The forest opened again, and they sprinted through the trees, the hunters close behind. Red beams cut through the darkness, lighting the night like lightning. Daniel dodged left, pulling Lyra down as a blast tore through the trunk of a tree where they had stood a second before. Splinters flew through the air. "Keep moving," he yelled. Lyra's legs stumbled, her body weak from exhaustion, but she forced herself to keep running. Daniel never let go of her hand, dragging her forward with sheer determination. The hunters spread out, their growls surrounding them. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't outrun them forever. He needed a way to slow them down. As they ran, he spotted a cluster of fallen logs ahead, blocking part of the path. Daniel pulled Lyra behind them and shoved one of the heavy logs with all his strength. It rolled down the slope, crashing into the path just as two hunters rounded the corner. They snarled as the log smashed into them, sending them sprawling into the mud. "Nice trick," Lyra gasped, her golden eyes wide with surprise. "Don't thank me yet," Daniel muttered. "We're not safe." They sprinted deeper into the forest. The canopy above grew thicker, plunging the path into near darkness. Strange glowing plants lit their way, casting eerie blue light across the undergrowth. Every step was a fight. Roots snagged their boots, branches clawed at their faces, and the hunters' roars grew closer. Suddenly, one of the hunters leapt from the shadows, blocking their path. His armor gleamed under the alien moon, and his weapon crackled with red energy. Daniel skidded to a stop, pulling Lyra behind him. His knife looked pitiful against the hunter's weapon, but he raised it anyway. The hunter laughed, a cruel rumbling sound. "You cannot protect her. You will both die," Before he could fire, Lyra stepped forward, her hands glowing faintly. Her golden eyes blazed with light. A strange energy pulsed from her body, striking the hunter like a wave. He staggered back, roaring in shock as his weapon flickered and died. Daniel's eyes widened. "Lyra, what was that?" She trembled, looking down at her glowing hands. I don't know, it just happened." The hunter snarled, recovering quickly, but Daniel didn't give him a chance. With a shout, he lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the hunter and knocking him off balance. The alien stumbled, slipped on the wet ground, and tumbled down the slope into the raging river below. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand again. "Come on." They ran until their lungs ached, finally breaking through the trees into a small clearing. Moonlight poured down, illuminating the exhausted pair. Daniel collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. Lyra fell beside him, trembling. "They won't stop," she whispered. "They'll keep coming." Daniel stared up at the alien sky, stars shining like scattered diamonds. He was tired, bleeding, and outnumbered. But he turned to her, his voice steady. "Then we'll keep running, and we'll keep fighting, together." Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she nodded without fear. The forest was still for now, but both of them knew. It was only the beginning. The clearing was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant rush of the river. Daniel lay on the grass, his chest heaving, his arm still burning from the near miss of the hunter's weapon. Beside him, Lyra hugged her knees, her body trembling from exhaustion. The silver glow of her skin flickered faintly, dimmer than before. For a few moments, neither spoke. They were both too tired, too shaken. Daniel stared at the alien sky above, its two moons casting pale light over the forest. Strange stars dotted the heavens, unfamiliar and endless. He had traveled many worlds, but tonight felt different. Tonight he wasn't just wandering. He was protecting something, someone. Finally, he turned his head toward Lyra. "That thing you did back there," he said softly. "The light from your hands." "What was it?" Lyra shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her golden eyes. "I don't know. I've never been able to control it. It just happens when I'm afraid. My people called it a gift once, but the hunters, they call it a weapon." Her voice cracked and she looked down at her hands as if ashamed of them. "That's why they want me. Not because of who I am, but because of what I can do." Daniel sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in his arm. He watched her carefully. "What you did saved us. That's not a curse. That's strength." She met his gaze, her eyes wet with tears. "You don't understand. Everyone I've ever been close to is gone because of this. Because of me. My parents tried to hide me and they died. My friends tried to protect me and they were taken. If you stay with me, you'll be next." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You listen to me, Lyra. What happened to them wasn't your fault. The only people to blame are the monsters chasing you. And as for me," he gave a faint, tired smile, "I've been running from my own ghosts for a long time. Maybe protecting you is the first thing that actually matters." Her lips trembled and she looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as a burden, not as a weapon, but as someone worth protecting. Daniel reached into his pack and pulled out a small flask of water. He handed it to her. "Drink. You need your strength." Lyra hesitated, but then took it with both hands, sipping carefully. The cool water slid down her throat, calming her shaking body. She handed it back with a quiet, "Thank you." Daniel leaned back against a tree. "You're safe for now. We'll rest a little, then move when the night grows darker. The hunters will keep searching, but they won't find us if we stay smart." Lyra nodded, but her golden eyes still carried worry. After a pause, she asked softly, "Why are you helping me, Daniel?" "Really?" The question lingered in the air. Daniel thought back to his life, his years of drifting between colonies, jobs that meant nothing, people who never stayed. He had always told himself he didn't need anyone, that caring only brought pain. Yet here he was, risking everything for a girl he had just met. He smiled faintly. "Because when you ran to me, you didn't see a soldier or a stranger. You saw hope, maybe. Maybe I need that as much as you do." Lyra's breath caught. She looked away, blinking back tears. No one had ever said words like that to her before. The silence between them softened. For the first time, the fear wasn't crushing, it was bearable. Daniel pulled out his medkit again and carefully unwrapped the bandage on Lyra's arm. The burns were raw and painful looking. He cleaned them gently, his touch steady and careful. She winced but didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered, "You're kind." Daniel chuckled quietly. "Not always, but maybe tonight I can be." As he wrapped her arm with fresh cloth, Lyra studied his face in the moonlight. His features were rough, worn by travel and struggle, yet there was something steady in his eyes, something she had never seen before. Trust. She lowered her voice. If we make it through this, what will you do?" Daniel shrugged. "One step at a time. First, we get you safe. After that, we'll figure it out." Lyra gave a faint smile, small but real. "No one's ever said we when talking about me before." Daniel looked at her and his voice was firm. "Well, get used to it. You're not alone anymore." The words settled deep in her heart. For the first time in years, the fear inside her loosened its grip. She leaned back against the tree, her eyes slowly closing. Her body, exhausted from the chase, finally allowed her a moment of rest. Daniel stayed awake, watching the shadows. He knew the hunters wouldn't give up. But he also knew something else. He wouldn't either. As he sat there, listening to Lyra's soft breathing, he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just duty or survival anymore. It was a promise. A bond had been formed, fragile but unbreakable. The forest was heavy with silence. Daniel sat against the tree, knife resting in his hand, his eyes sharp and alert. Lyra slept lightly beside him, her head resting against her knees. The bond they had formed gave her enough peace to close her eyes, but Daniel knew it would not last. Hunters didn't stop. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint metallic scent. Daniel's instincts tightened. He nudged Lyra gently. "Wake up." Her golden eyes blinked open, confusion quickly turning to fear as she saw his expression. She didn't need to ask, she felt it too. They weren't alone. Before either could move, the night exploded with sound. Red beams of energy tore through the clearing, scorching the ground where they had been sitting moments before. Daniel grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her behind a fallen log as more shots rained down. The hunters had found them. "Come out, human," the leader's voice boomed through the trees. "We will end this quickly if you surrender. Resist and you will suffer." Daniel clenched his jaw. He whispered to Lyra, "Stay low. No matter what happens, don't let them take you." Lyra's breath trembled. "You'll get killed." Daniel gave her a sharp look. "Better me than you. Now stay down." He peeked over the log. At least 5 hunters were visible, their glowing armor casting an eerie red light. They moved with military precision, weapons ready. Daniel knew he couldn't face them head on. He had to be smart. He waited until one hunter came too close, then lunged from cover. With a burst of strength, he tackled the alien, slamming his knife into the gap between the hunter's armor plates. The creature roared, thrashing, but Daniel twisted the blade deeper until the body went limp. The other hunters snarled in rage. Red beams sliced the air around Daniel, forcing him back into cover. He panted, sweat dripping down his face, but his grip on the knife tightened. One down, too many left. Lyra crouched behind the log, her hands shaking. Her chest burned with the same energy she had felt before. She whispered, "I can help. I can use it." Daniel grabbed her shoulders, his voice sharp. "No, not unless you have no choice. If they realize what you can do, they'll come harder, stronger. You have to stay hidden. But you'll die, then I'll die protecting you." His words cut the air like steel. His eyes softened for a moment as he saw her tears. "Trust me, Lyra, just a little longer." The hunters advanced, closing the circle. Daniel's mind raced. He spotted a cluster of rocks above the clearing, loose and heavy. If he could lure them under it. He grabbed a stone and hurled it into the bushes opposite them. The noise echoed, drawing 2 hunters toward the sound. Daniel waited, then leapt from cover, sprinting up the slope. Energy beams tore past him, one grazing his leg and sending fire through his muscles. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself higher. Reaching the rocks, he shoved his weight against them. For a moment they didn't budge, then, with a grinding roar, they tumbled down. The boulders crashed into the clearing, smashing trees and throwing 2 hunters off their feet. Daniel collapsed to one knee, gasping in pain, but forced himself back up. He stumbled down to Lyra, pulling her to her feet. "Run!" They bolted through the trees again, branches tearing at their skin. Behind them, the remaining hunters roared in fury, giving chase. Daniel's injured leg slowed him, but he pushed on, refusing to let go of Lyra's hand. Then the leader appeared ahead, blocking their path. His armor glowed brighter than the others, his weapon pulsing with deadly energy. He raised it slowly, the red light bathing their faces. "It ends here," he growled. "The girl comes with us. You will die." Daniel stood in front of Lyra, knife ready though his body screamed in exhaustion. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The hunter laughed, a sound like grinding stone. He fired. The blast streaked toward them, but at the last moment Lyra stepped forward. Her hands glowed with fierce golden light, brighter than before. The energy shot out in a wave, colliding with the hunter's blast and scattering it into sparks. The leader staggered, shocked. Lyra's body shook as the power surged through her, but her eyes blazed with determination. "You won't take me," she shouted, her voice ringing with strength. The golden wave struck the hunter, throwing him backward into a tree, his weapon shattered, sparks flying. The ground shook from the impact. Daniel stared, breathless. "Lyra." She fell to her knees, drained, her glow fading. Daniel rushed to catch her before she collapsed completely. Her head rested against his shoulder, her voice weak. "I couldn't let him hurt you." Daniel held her close, anger and awe burning in his chest. He looked up at the surviving hunters who stood frozen, uncertain for the first time. Their leader groaned, struggling to rise, his armor cracked. Daniel's voice rang clear. "You see her? She's not your weapon. She's not your prey. She's free, and you'll never take her." The hunters hesitated, their confidence shaken, but Daniel knew this fight wasn't over. Not yet. The confrontation had changed everything. Lyra was no longer just running. She was fighting back. And together they had just shown the hunters something they hadn't expected. Resistance. The forest was silent again, but it was not peace. Smoke rose from the shattered weapon of the hunter leader. Broken trees and scorched earth marked the clearing where the fight had raged. The surviving hunters stood still, their glowing eyes watching in shock as their leader struggled to rise. Daniel held Lyra tightly in his arms. She was pale, her silver skin dimmed from exhaustion, but her golden eyes still shone faintly. She had given everything in that burst of power, and now she trembled like a fragile flame. "You did it," Daniel whispered, his voice raw. "You stood against him." Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. I couldn't let them take you. You're the only one who ever stayed." Those words pierced Daniel's heart deeper than any wound. He looked at her bruises, her scars, the tears still on her cheeks, and for the first time in years he felt his own eyes burn. The leader staggered to his feet, his armor cracked, his voice filled with rage. "This is not over. She belongs to us." Daniel stood, keeping Lyra behind him. His knife was raised, though he knew he could barely fight anymore. But something in his stance, something in his eyes, made even the hunters hesitate. He wasn't just a wanderer anymore. He was a protector. Then, to Daniel's surprise, the hunters began to retreat. Their leader hissed, pointing a claw at Lyra. "We will find you again. You cannot hide forever. Her blood is ours." With that, they melted into the shadows, their glowing eyes fading until the forest swallowed them whole. The sudden silence was crushing. Daniel dropped his knife and turned back to Lyra. She looked at him, her golden eyes filling with tears. For the first time, there was no fear in them, only relief. "They'll come back," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Then let them. We'll be ready next time, together." Her tears spilled over, running down her silver cheeks. Why risk everything for me? I bring only danger, pain." Daniel shook his head, his voice breaking. "Because when you ran to me, I saw more than fear. I saw someone worth fighting for. I've spent so long wandering, never belonging anywhere. But tonight, protecting you felt like the only thing that mattered." Lyra's lips parted, a sob escaping her throat. She leaned forward, burying her face against his chest. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried, not from terror this time, but from the weight of being seen, being valued. For years, she had carried her grief alone. Tonight, she was no longer alone. The two moons glowed high above, casting silver light over the broken clearing. The forest, scarred from battle, seemed to grow quiet in respect. Daniel whispered softly against her hair, "You're free now, Lyra. As long as I live, no one will ever put you in chains again." Her voice was muffled, but he heard the words. "You're the reason I survived." Daniel's chest tightened. He had faced death before, but nothing had ever struck him so deeply. He pulled back slightly to look at her face. Her golden eyes shimmered with tears, but there was hope in them too, fragile but real. "We'll keep moving," he said gently. "We'll find somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach us." Lyra nodded weakly. She was exhausted, but in her heart a new fire had been lit. She was no longer just running for survival. She was running with someone who cared enough to fight beside her. Daniel took off his worn jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She clutched it tightly, warmth spreading through her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel cold. They sat together under the twin moons, the night air cool and quiet around them. Daniel leaned against the tree, keeping his arm around her as she slowly drifted to sleep. He stared out into the forest, eyes sharp, mind heavy with determination. He knew the hunters would come again. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew this. He wasn't alone anymore either. As dawn began to rise, painting the sky with shades of gold and violet, Daniel whispered to himself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And somewhere deep inside he realized the truth. Protecting Lyra had healed something broken in him. The girl who had come running in fear had given him purpose, a reason to fight, a reason to hope, a reason to cry.